For 41 years, Ellis Rayner trusted dry ground. He could look across a field outside Georgetown, South Carolina, and tell you what it would give back before the first seed went in. So when a woman from Charleston paid $28,400 for 52 acres of black marsh, Ellis knew exactly what she had bought. Snakes, mosquitoes, and a very expensive lesson. What Ellis could not see from the road were the 3 rotted cypress gates half buried in the creek bank. Naomi Grant saw them before she saw anything else. The county had listed the old bellwether tract 3 times in 7 years. Nobody wanted it. Too wet for soybeans, too soft for timber, too uneven for cattle. In summer, the ditches went black and warm. In winter, the north wind pushed through the reeds and made the place look even emptier than it was. Ellis had driven past it since the 1980s. To him, it was a piece of land that had already explained itself. Naomi was 46 the morning she signed the papers. She had slept the night before in the front seat of her truck behind a gas station near Pawleys Island because she did not want to spend money on a motel. When she came out of the county office with a folder under one arm, Ellis was sitting in his own truck across the lot, waiting on a man from the seed co-op. He watched her climb into a faded blue pickup with a cracked taillight. He did not laugh at her. Ellis was not cruel, but he did shake his head. He thought, that woman is about to find out why cheap land is cheap. He was right about the finding out. He was wrong about who was going to learn. By 2024, Naomi Grant was running Etta's Tide Gold from a converted equipment shed on the edge of that same marsh. That year, she sold 29,700 pounds of heirloom Carolina gold rice to chefs, small grocers, and mail-order customers across 19 states. Her average price was $9.10 a pound. The gross revenue from the rice alone was $270,270. That came from land the local agricultural office had once described to her as unsuitable for any dependable commercial grain crop. The man who told her that was not trying to insult her. He had numbers. He had soil maps. He had yield models. Naomi had something those models did not measure. She knew how to read water. The bellwether tract had not grown rice commercially in almost 90 years. But before that, it had been part of a tidal rice system that reached back generations. The low ground did not need engines to flood it. The creek did that twice a day. The tide lifted the black water through the cut, pressed fresh water against the old banks, and then drew it away again. To most people, that movement looked like nuisance. To Naomi, it looked like machinery. The old cypress tide gates were the proof. They had been built to control when the field drank and when it breathed. By the time Naomi found them, the boards were soft with rot. The iron pins were orange. One gate had collapsed into the mud so completely that it looked like driftwood, unless you knew what a hinge scar looked like. Naomi knew. Her grandmother had shown her. Her name was Etta Mae Grant, born in 1926 in a Gullah Geechee community north of McClellanville. She never owned much land. She never called herself a historian. She never stood at a microphone and explained heritage to strangers. What she did was grow rice on wet edges where other people planted nothing. a quarter-acre behind the house, a narrow run beside the creek, a low square of ground that flooded when the moon and the wind agreed. The seed had come down through the women in her family, saved in glass jars with tin lids, selected year after year from the strongest heads. It was not a commercial release. It was not a bag from a seed catalog. It was rice that had survived because someone kept choosing it, drying it, guarding it, and putting it back into mud. Naomi was 8 when Etta first made her stand in the water before sunrise. She remembered the cold more than anything. The mud squeezed between her toes inside rubber boots that were too big. The mosquitoes lifted in a gray cloud. Etta held her wrist and told her not to watch the plant first. Watch the water. Brown like tea meant one thing. Green on top meant another. A sharp smell meant the field had sat too long. A clean mineral smell meant the creek had just given it a fresh turn. Etta could kneel by a ditch and tell whether salt had crept too far inland. She could rub a rice head between her fingers and know how many more days it wanted. She could crack one grain between her teeth and hear, almost before she felt it, whether it was ready for the stone. As a child, Naomi thought this was just what grandmothers knew. She did not understand that knowledge can become invisible when the world stops paying for it. After high school, Naomi left for Charleston and became a payroll clerk for a dock repair company. She was good at ledgers, good at invoices, good at noticing where money was leaking before anyone else admitted there was a hole. She was practical in the way people become practical when no one is coming to rescue them. For years, rice was something she visited on weekends. Then Etta died in January of 2009 after a wet, cold spell that settled into her chest and would not leave. Naomi cleaned the little house with her mother and her aunt. In the kitchen, above the window, there were 6 jars of seed wrapped in a flour sack. On one jar, Etta had written one word in pencil: keep. Naomi took that jar back to Charleston. For almost a year, she did nothing with it. She moved it from one shelf to another. She told herself she was preserving it. But every time she saw it, she felt the same uncomfortable thought. Seed is not preserved by being admired. Seed is preserved by being risked. In the spring of 2011, Naomi planted rice in 29 plastic feed tubs behind her rental duplex. Her landlord told her it looked like she was raising frogs. By October, she had 22 pounds of clean grain and a notebook full of mistakes. The next year, she doubled it. At night, she read old field records, coastal agriculture papers, and anything she could find about tidal rice. She was not looking for romance. She was looking for instructions the present had forgotten how to value. She learned enough to know that most abandoned rice land was not worth chasing. Too salty, too developed, too broken, too expensive. But she also learned what a usable field would leave behind: a certain bend in the creek, a certain height above the tide, old berms visible only when grass fell flat in winter, wooden gate remains where nobody had bothered to remove them. In February of 2013, the bellwether tract appeared in a county surplus listing. 52 acres, here's out of state. No paved access beyond a shell road. Wetland complications. Asking price $31,000. Naomi drove there the next morning with a thermos, rubber boots, a measuring rod, and 2 days of tide tables printed from a library computer. She walked the property for 5 hours, not the way a buyer walks land with a real estate agent, nodding at boundaries and imagining a driveway. She walked it like a person reading a sentence in a language she had almost forgotten she knew. At the first creek cut, she found the top of a cypress plank under mud. At the second, she found 2 iron pins still set into the bank. At the third, she watched the water reverse direction without a pump, without a motor, without anybody touching it. That was the moment. The land was not empty. It was locked, and the lock was still there. She made an offer the following Monday for $28,400. The agent did not hide his surprise. He warned her about snakes, standing water, access problems, crop limitations, and the fact that 3 previous interested buyers had walked away after inspection. Naomi thanked him for every warning. Then she signed. The first year was not a victory lap. It was mud, bills, and exhaustion. Only 30 acres of the 52 were even possible for tidal rice. The rest was too high, too shaded, or too brackish in dry months. Of those 30 acres, Naomi chose 9 for the first planting, because 9 was the number her spreadsheet could survive. The gates came first. She found Jonah Epps, a 73-year-old retired boat builder who had once helped repair historic tide gates for a museum demonstration near the Santee. Jonah did not want a job. Naomi went to his porch anyway, with photographs, sketches, and a pound cake from her aunt. He looked at the pictures for a long time. Then he asked her who taught her what she was looking at. Naomi said, "My grandmother." Jonah came the next day. By the end of the summer, Naomi, Jonah, Jonah's nephew, and 2 cousins had rebuilt all 3 gates with salvaged cypress. The material and paid labor cost came to $11,600, not counting the hours Naomi refused to count, because counting them would have frightened her. Every expense went into a spreadsheet. Gate lumber, fuel, seed trays, milling repairs, temporary harvest labor, packaging, postage. She modeled the business at $4 a pound, $6 a pound, $8 a pound, and 10. At 4, it died. At 6, it limped. At 8, it breathed. At 10, it could grow. The county advisor who visited in June of 2014 told her the hard truth as he understood it. Tidal flooded, small acreage, hand-managed rice did not fit modern grain economics. The yield per acre would be too low. The labor would be too high. Machinery access would be limited. The field conditions would punish any mistake. He suggested she consider aquaculture in the wetter pockets and a hardy forage crop on the higher ground. Naomi listened carefully. She had learned from Etta never to reject advice just because it came from someone who did not understand the whole field. The advisor was right about the commodity math. He was wrong about the customer. Naomi was not growing rice for commodity buyers. She was growing rice for people who wanted flavor, origin, method, and a grain they could not get from an industrial bin. Before she planted her first commercial acre, she had already spoken with 12 chefs, 4 specialty grocers, and 2 heritage food buyers who understood that the story was not decoration. The story was part of the value because it explained the grain. Her first harvest came in October of 2014. 9 acres, 2,680 pounds of clean milled rice. She had pre-sold 2,100 pounds before the crop was cut at an average of $7.40 per pound. The first restaurant order was not large. 40 pounds a month from a Charleston kitchen that had been looking for true Carolina gold with a traceable Lowcountry origin. Then another chef called from Savannah. Then a grocer in Columbia. Then a mail-order customer in Virginia wrote to say the rice smelled like corn, chestnuts, and rain. Naomi printed that email and taped it above the packing table. Not because it was poetic, because it meant the customer understood. Ellis Rayner did not come to the field until late August of 2016. He had meant to keep driving. Then he saw green where he expected black water. He pulled onto the shell road, shut off his truck, and stood at the fence with one hand on the post. The field was flooded just below the stalks. The rice moved in one sheet when the wind crossed it. At the creek line, the new cypress gate held its angle like an old machine remembering its job. Ellis watched for a long time. Then he knocked on the shed door. Naomi opened it with rice dust on her sleeves. He said, "I don't believe I understood what you were doing out here." She said, "Most people didn't." There was no bitterness in it. That bothered him more than bitterness would have. She showed him the gates first, then the drying racks, then the small stone mill she had bought, used from a grain farmer in Vermont and repaired with Jonah's help. On a folding table, there were orders clipped into stacks by state. Ellis asked what the field was yielding. Naomi told him. He asked what she was getting per pound. She told him that too. He went quiet. Ellis had spent his life calculating land by what it could produce under the system he already knew. Bushels, inputs, weather risk, commodity price, diesel, debt. Naomi had not made the land more valuable by forcing it to behave like his fields. She made it valuable by listening to what kind of field it already was. That is a harder lesson than it sounds, because most people do not misread land only with their eyes. They misread it with their assumptions. A wet field becomes waste. An old method becomes backward. A grandmother's instruction becomes a sweet memory instead of technical knowledge. A crop that cannot compete on bulk price becomes impossible, even when it was never meant to compete there. By 2019, Naomi had 16 acres in rice. By 2022, 24. By 2024, she was managing 29 acres of tidal impoundment and a small dry plot where she was testing a short-season grain for rotation. She hired seasonal help at harvest and one year-round assistant, Amina Brooks, who had come to her through a coastal foodways apprenticeship and stayed because she liked the work of making old systems legible again. The original seed from Etta's jar is still the base of the crop. Naomi does not sell seed. She does not send it away for commercial multiplication. Each season, the best plants are tagged before harvest, cut separately, dried on cotton sheets, and stored in jars above the office window. The same instruction remains written on the label. Keep. Naomi is 57 now. Most mornings she walks the gates before breakfast. She checks the tide height. She looks at the color of the water. She touches the mud at the inside edge of the bank and smells her fingers before she writes anything down. It is not nostalgia. It is management. Ellis retired from farming with enough to live on and more humility than he had when he started. He still comes by sometimes for coffee in the equipment shed. He has told the story often enough that people now ask him to repeat it when someone new joins the table. He always says the same thing. I thought she bought swamp. Then he points toward the field. Turns out she bought a system I didn't know how to see. That is the part he cannot stop thinking about. Not the revenue, though the revenue is real. Not the restaurants, though their checks cleared. Not even the rice itself, though he admits it tastes better than anything he grew up eating from a store bag. What stays with him is the waiting. Those gates waited under mud while everyone called the land useless. The seed waited in a jar while the market forgot its name. The knowledge waited in kitchens, creek edges, church suppers, and grandmothers' hands while official people measured value with tools that could not detect it. Then one woman came along who did not need the land to introduce itself. She already knew its language. Naomi Grant did not leave Naomi a farm. Not exactly. She left her a way of seeing. The world is full of locked rooms that look empty to people who do not carry the key. Some are fields, some are skills, some are memories. Some are whole systems dismissed because the people who understood them were never treated as authorities. Naomi did not discover value in that marsh. She recognized it, and recognition in the right hands can look a lot like a miracle.